Good morning, Achoja Warriors. I am excited. Today is February 1st, and so what that means is we are in Black History Month. So I've been thinking, I've been kind of planning, look, what am I going to do in Black History Month? And I thought it would be an excellent month to just combine some of the things that I have been researching and working on, but focusing on the idea of right, what's my passion project? Restoring Black wealth. How do we do that? And coming up with different ways to do that. And I thought a pretty cool thing we could do for the month of February is each day to take a successful Black in sporting, entrepreneurship, and just a whole variety of avenues and industries, and to see what we can pluck as far as commonality, some things that they have done that maybe we can find similar patterns, and then we can see if there's some way that we can create our own blueprint to be able to do certain things. And it's important that we understand a couple things. One is, even though we see people, and what I mean by that is, even though we see how successful people have become, it is often important to remember where they started from, and to understand not only the fact that they can do it, you can do it, but more importantly, to understand that these people were grinding. And we're not talking about 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. We're talking about they made a life goal and then they achieved it. And it took time for them to do that. And so I thought, what better place to start than with the first Black billionaire, at least the first American Black billionaire, which is Robert L. Johnson. Robert L. Johnson. And if you are familiar with that name, then you already know that Robert L. Johnson is actually the creator, the founder of Black Entertainment Television, BET. Now, he did sell his company to Viacom for $3 billion, and that is somewhere that we'll end up at. But let's start with just this idea, this visionary, and the idea that he said, you know what? I'm going to create a television program, a complete station that is dedicated to Black entertainment. And when you're looking at the way TV programming was at the time, right? So we're talking about in 1980 is when he created this company. And there was twofold. One is there's generally a negative perception of Blacks. Like even to this day, about 80% of Black and brown people that are casted for roles, if you're Hispanic, you're either going to be cast as a gang member or an illegal immigrant, like 80% of the time, like crazy numbers. And if you're Black, you're going to be cast as a gang member, like some abusive single parent household, like something like that, where the idea is that 80% of the time you see Black and brown people, they are cast in a negative light. And so Robert had this idea that he was going to create something to try to combat that. And it's not as important that we talk about the idea that, well, that didn't work, these numbers are still bad, and things like that. It's the idea that we see a problem and then we try to work on a solution. And that is the number one step that I believe that in so firmly that you have to try. And the reason I say that is I come across lots of people who simply tell me, Dre, I'm just not even going to try. There's no reason to try. It's very difficult for us to make it in this world. Things are stacked against us. And I get all of that, and I can share the stories with you. But believe me when I tell you that if you don't try that, that makes it so much easier for them. You have to at least try. So Robert, he got up, he said, okay, he started working in the industry. So he had different jobs over several years where he was able to learn some of the ropes of media broadcasting. And I think that is often the important first step that we skip. If you have a passion, if you have something that you believe that you should be doing in life, you have to start by gathering the information. You have to start by understanding what is necessary to accomplish your goal. And whether that is the funding, whether that is just the idea of a team that you have to compile, or whether we're talking about just the funding and creating the blueprints and getting people to buy in, hiring and casting and all that stuff. And like, you just have to say, okay, like, let's take steps as we work towards this goal. I think we often get too excited where we're like, this is how I want to see things. I'm going to create this multi-billion-dollar company. I'm going to change the world. It's going to be epic. It's going to be glorious. They're going to, put the flag at half mast when I go. But yes, and I'm not saying that you can't do that, but what I'm saying is, where do you start? And you often have to start by learning about whatever that industry, whatever that position requires of you. And so, even if you were someone who was in a company and you had a job, if you wanted to go into a different industry, or if you wanted to even just get a promotion within the same company, it's a good idea to start by just shadowing someone in the position that you want. And the reason that that is good is twofold. One is you're going to learn some of the skills, some of the lingo, and some of the strategies that's going to help you when you're trying to interview, when you're talking to other people. And two, you're just going to find out if it's really all that it's cracked up to be, right? Like we often have this idea that, well, this is going to be so amazing, the grass is greener on the other side, and this is exactly what I wanted, and it's going to like check off all my boxes, right? It's going to be rainbows and skittles all over the place, like it's going to be great. And then you get there and you're like, oh my gosh, if I knew this, I would never taken it, even though the pay was more. The amount of work that they're giving me in contrast to the amount of extra pay that I've received, it's like nothing compared like to that. Like I would not take it, right? Like there is this, oh, okay, well, where did you get the first perception from? And oftentimes it is someone else who has a little information, or it is just simply us looking from a distance and we're like, oh, that looks cool over there. Oh, well, that looks easy. You know, I see Bob come in at 2 and I see him leave at 5. It seems like a pretty cool team to be on, right? And then you get on the team and you realize it's nothing like that. And so you want to always start with gathering the information. So Bob was no different. Where he started was in the industry with different odd jobs, and he was able to grow in the media production. And then that's what helped him to recognize that there was a need. And then that brings you in right number 2 is that if you see a problem, create a solution for it, right? So the first is we have to understand what's going on. And when you understand it, right, like you probably have heard people say things where it's like, well, if you want, you have to learn the rules, you have to follow the rules to be able to break the rules. You can't just go around breaking rules if you have no idea why the rule was in place in the first place, or even what that rule, maybe the implications of changing it are. You have to understand what's going on before you make any of those changes. So by the time you get the information, then you move into finding a problem and then you solving it. Then number 3 is you're going to have to tell yourself, look, at some point, there is a amount of work that is required of me. And then as I am working on that, that it is going to require me to expand my network. I'm going to have to bring other experts in to help me with some of the things that I have difficulties grasping, right? Like it's true that you could sit there and learn everything, and then you could maybe over a period of 3 months or 4 months or a year become proficient in it. But I would rather ask you, would your money be better spent hiring an expert? And what I mean is, if you sit there and say, how much is my hourly wage, right? Like, how much am I worth per hour, right? And if you then say, well, for me to hire someone to do this role would only cost me $10, $20, $25 an hour, am I worth more than that? And if someone is an expert and they're able to create an expert level result with $25 an hour, am I creating a mediocre result using 5 times the amount of time and I'm getting half of the results, right? Does that sound like a good use of my time? And then realistically, you would say no. And so as you need to expand your network, this is going to allow you to bring in other experts within different fields because, right, you don't know what you don't know. And if you spend all of your time kind of in your own silo, what often ends up happening is we lose a small grip of reality. And while it sounds like I'm being a little extra, and I sort of am, it's really something that we just generally, it happens to us. We have to be able to communicate, share a message, get sounding boards, because if we just are only talking to ourselves, we get that echo chamber where everything is a great idea. It's always a great idea. And there's only people that don't understand yet or something of that nature. And so you want to make sure that you shield yourself from the idea that you are just only talking to either yes people or you're only talking to yourself, because that can be a very dangerous result. And so now if you look over the span, like I told you a little bit, that we're talking about that daily habit of building something every single day, a little bit at a time. And what I mean by that is if you look at the way BET started and you looked at how it came into the early 2000s where he was able to sell it for $3 billion, there was a lot of struggles, some ebbs and flows, some gives and some takes along the way. And as he learned more, right, like even even if you look at just the way that those channels are done in general, right, where there was a point in time where they were overloaded with like music videos, like that's what the blueprint was. People liked watching music videos, so that was what most of the programming was around. And then over time, you see that it has gone into where it was a lot of like talking heads, where it was almost like they were bordering like a news program where it was a lot of people talking a lot and very little music. And then you kind of shifted into where you've seen it in the later years, where it's almost just like a regular television program with a lot of sitcoms, and they have a more original programming now. And so that's Tyler Perry's shows, and we could talk about that at another time. But you see that there is a transition along the way, twofold. One is you're learning more and you're understanding what people are interested in as you get that feedback, and then two, people opinions change, right? Like it's not even necessarily that you're wrong when you first started on your path. It's just that the goalpost has moved along the way, and that's nobody's fault. Things just change. Sometimes politics or even regulations or even just life events, it changes people's perception of things. And as that changes, then what you are providing them, what you are giving them, changes as well. And so a good example of that would be, look at the way any fast food restaurant or is really advertising to people, right? Like there was a point in time where it was just a big deal to say, well, get your food to you fast and it'll be really cheap. But we're now becoming a little more health conscious, where we're linking the food to a lot of health scares with cancers and diabetes, where people are now saying, well, I need to know that my where the meat came from. I need to know what you're injecting into the meat, or if it was cage raised or free roaming, and what country it came from. Where now people are asking more questions, even to the point where they're asking, how many calories is in that? Like, I need to know so I can figure out how it fits into my daily diet. And so you see now a lot of these fast food companies where they're starting to add all these little comments where they're like, this is 100% without antibiotics, or this is 100% organic, or this is free roaming. Like they're adding these little nuggets of information that they know people are interested in knowing about. And so you want to make sure that as you're building something, as you talk about the idea of building wealth, that it always comes down to how many people are you helping. Because as I often mention, that's why you see a lot of entrepreneurs end up very successful. Even athletes end up very successful in the amount of income that they generate. And it's because the more people that you help, or the more people that you provide value to, the more that you end up making for yourself. And I think that that is one of the beauties of entrepreneurship, is that if you're doing it right, you're just helping lots of people, right? It's like the idea is, do you have a problem, and can I solve your problem for a profit, right? That is, in a nutshell, what entrepreneurship is. That's what selling is. Do you have a problem? No. Okay, great. Do you have a problem? Yes. Okay, what is it? Oh, I can help with that, right? Like that, to me, that's what it is. I know we get very complicated and we have negative perceptions of what selling or business owners or things like that is. But for me, that's what it means. That's what it means to me, right? So, and that's why my passion project, that's why I'm in the financial services industry. That's why my passion is to help restore black wealth, so that in the year 2053, it's not at zero. And then 20 years after that, for the Hispanic community, they're projected to be at zero, because it's a big deal. Like that should not be something that should be happening in the wealthiest country in the world. And so that is what drives me each day. And anyone, and I do mean anyone, who shares that passion and commitment and just was like, this is something that we should fix, I will always talk to them. Whether that is going out to lunch or coffee, or just putting on a workshop or a seminar or speaking, like that is what I love doing. And it's tied to the value that I bring, right? The more value I bring, the more wealth that I generate for other people, the more that I make. And so I find it that entrepreneurship is a beautiful relationship if you're doing it right. And so, same with sporting events, right? Like I took economics of sports and in college, and it was like, how do these athletes make all this money? And it's because, well, if you take the ticket sales and you take the jersey sales and you put all these numbers together, and then you can figure out how much a team is worth. And then you can start picking which athletes people are coming to watch, right? Like the idea that if LeBron James is on your team is worth significantly more than when he's off your team. So the question becomes, okay, is he worth more or less than $50 million a year? And the question is, he's worth a lot more, right? Like a lot more than that, because he's generating more than that for your team each year. And you can see the way that the ticket sales goes down, and the news coverage and the commercial and the ad revenue, all that stuff drops when you don't have a superstar on your team. And so you can see the correlations, and it actually is something that's very interesting to me. So they create value as well. So how did Robert Johnson become the first black billionaire? Well, he provided millions of blacks value through his media programming. And we're not talking necessarily about any particular show and different opinions on that. We're just simply saying that if you are raising a black family and you are trying to find some sort of representation that looks similar to you, where your kids can look and be like, they look like me, where adults can be like, listening to jokes and they can be like, that's how my life is, that he filled that hole. And it created a huge benefit. And so you have to ask yourself, what problems are in my life that I could solve and that maybe in other people's lives? What issues are in my community that I can resolve and other people would be interested in that being done in their community? That is always where you start when it comes to building wealth and restoring black wealth. And then from there, you move into, how do I reinvest this in my community? How can I help the schooling? How can I help the funding for different projects or community centers, different things? What can I do with the money that I reinvested in the community? I find that that is often the overlooked aspect, that a lot of the times the money is being taken out of the community and then it's being reinvested somewhere else. And that's why it ends up creating some of the the food deserts and different things where you find around the community. So you have to be willing to get that education, to get the experience, to find the problems, to solve it, and then you're able to go back and help your community. If everyone was able to do that, then you'll see the tides start to rise as we're able to work together. And that's where I'll close at. And I actually had heard it before, that you find that the wealthiest people solve problems where it allows lots of people to make a living off of that. Lots of people get wealthy, right? I.e., think of Microsoft. How many people were a part of that are very wealthy because they either invested in Microsoft early or they were able to do something within the company? Like, how many people, right? We're talking like hundreds, if not thousands of people are very well off because of Microsoft. What can you do in a similar circumstance where you're able to help hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people, but then you're able to help your team also be taken care of, where you're able to help a dozen or so people when you're starting off, because that's going to attract more people to your projects. And it's also going to help people to say, this person's working with people, they're helping people, he or she is very interested in helping the community. It's not all about them and I, but really we in team. And so you find that the most successful people, that they have these different traits where they're able to do these different things. And I'll close on just the discipline and the perseverance that's needed. It is not an easy path. If it was, we would all already be very, very wealthy, successful people. It's very difficult of a journey. It requires a lot of consistent daily actions where you don't see the reward for months, if not years sometimes. And the only way you're going to grow that is by continuing to nurture and to grow it. You have to be able to believe that everything that I'm doing today is going to provide a value in the future. Have to be firm in that belief. Most people lose that belief, that conviction along the way, and then the tree that they're growing dies because they stop nurturing it, they stop watering it, they stop feeding it. You gotta believe that, hey, I put the seed in the ground. If I water it every day, I'm going to see something one day. And I just have to keep watering, and I have to keep researching, making sure that I'm giving it the proper amount of sunlight and that I'm giving it everything that it needs to grow and be successful. And so that'll be a mindset moment. I'm always thankful for our time together. I'm thankful for just your watching, your comments, your viewership. If you enjoyed this video, subscribe and like on YouTube. If you enjoyed listening to it, then also be able to subscribe and like on the podcast, the Change Blindness Podcast. Until next time, continue blessings on your journey to become the champion of your dream life. And as always, better self, better wealth.